Hey, what's going on, roleplayers? It's that Bard here, and welcome back to the corner. Now, I expect the hardcore D&Ders amongst you have already purchased it, but I decided to treat myself to Tasha's Cauldron of everything. So on my initial look through, it seemed like I was getting so much. It just seemed like so many options. But once I dissected it a little, broke it down into its component parts, and really evaluated what was going on inside it, I began to wonder if it was really worth it. So just as a little break from the usual kind of content that I do, I'm going to have a quick overview of Tasha's Cauldron of everything, and we're going to decide if it's actually something you need to have in your collection. So as with everything, if you already own this book, that's fine. If you think it's the best thing since sliced bread, I'm not going to take that away from you. I'm just going to say what I feel about it, and perhaps maybe where they could have improved it a little, or if there's just more or less things they should have put in or things they should have taken out. So as with everything, it's always best to start at the beginning. So the first chapter is character options. This is the real meat of the book. This is what you're buying it for. This one chapter alone encompasses nearly half of the entire book. So this is what it's all about. If you're opening up this book for the first time, this is probably the first section you're going to be looking at. And there are so many options available for making new and distinct characters. And I'm always an advocate for that, because anything that adds to your character development is always going to be a good thing. Don't be put off by just how many character options there are. Some of it is actually quite illusory. So as you're looking through, you're going to notice common themes throughout. There are going to be repeats of certain things, and you're going to also notice things from other supplements as well. So if you already have a pretty large D&D collection, you're going to notice some of the things that are repeated. Things like the Artificer class, and maybe the Bladesinger subclass. So this is what I would call a matter of perspective. If you don't own the Eberron Guide, if you don't own the Sword Coast Adventurers book, then there are things in Tasha's Cauldron of everything that you're going to want to take advantage of. So it's definitely worth it if all you care about is options. If, however, you prefer more of the game worlds that have already been pre-established, then you're probably better off just picking up Rising from the Last War or Sword Coast Adventurers Guide. This whole chapter is somewhat of a mixed bag in my opinion. There are things that you absolutely must have, there are things that are really useful to have, and there are other things that fall by the wayside. So what do I mean by that? So let's use the Ranger as an example. One of the first things I noticed about the Ranger was the new class ability which will replace your favoured enemy feature, which is the favoured foe. And I really like this because I think it's one of the things that you can add to the character that really improves its playability. Ranger has a bit of a history of being one of those almost borderline unplayable classes. I really like the Ranger in whatever guise it takes, but the problem is it's usually just not competitive when you're trying to keep up with the other players around the table. Now, you should always play what you like, and you should always just play the character however you see fit, but sometimes you just want to be able to do what everyone else is doing. And Favoured Foe is one of those things that I think is a great swap out and can really give you a larger boost when it comes to combat. These are the kind of options that I think are really necessary, alternative class features. So if you have a more combat heavy game, Favoured Foe is the ideal pick. If you have a more investigation based style game, then perhaps you're going to want to keep the favoured enemy feature. But whatever it is, you'll notice things like this across the whole selection of character classes. Then there's some of the things that are nice to have. So additional spells. Almost every class that has spells is going to get additional spells added to their spell list. And this isn't vital, but it does help make certain classes more playable, or bring them more in line with what they ought to have been from the original printing of the Player's Handbook. So for example, there's some really good changes made to Sorcerer. They have access to spells like Grease, Magic Weapon, Vampiric Touch, Fire Shield, and even Demiplane. These are good spells. They're ones that I really like, and I think they're very necessary even for a sorceress character. And it's nice to see that they've expanded the spell lists for all of the spellcasting classes. So it gives you more options, but it also helps you to, again, bring your character more in line with the vision that you have in your head. So having those extra spells, having those additional subclass options, they're really nice and they can add a lot of individuality, but I think that the options that modify the base class, that help the class as a whole, they're more important, and that's why I rate those as being absolutely necessary, whereas things like additional spells and additional subclasses, they're nice to have. They're just not mandatory. So there's some of the good things in this chapter, but it wouldn't really be a fair analysis if we didn't look at some of the turkeys that are in here as well. So let's go back to the Ranger, and we're going to look at the 4th level Ranger feature, Martial Versatility. It says whenever you reach a level in this class that grants an ability score improvement, you can replace a fighting style you know with another fighting style available to Rangers, and the replacement represents a shift of focus in your martial practice. There are abilities like this throughout the character classes available in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and these are what I would consider to be filler. Some people love that versatility, being able to chop and change aspects of their character on a whim, but not me. I think if I make a selection, it really helps to define the kind of character that I'm playing. I don't really want to just be able to change it on a whim just because something is more practical at the time. I think if you're going to make those kind of changes, it's something that really ought to be discussed with your DM, and it can lead to a whole other adventure, a whole new retraining program for your character, a whole new quest to change that aspect of yourself. But with so many options like this for all the character classes that just allow you to change things when you feel like it, it's not really the same as having character options that define you as a character. And I just think it's a bit of a lazy kind of filler ability that they've added just to take up some space. The class that seems to suffer from this the most is Fighter. As you go through the Fighter section, you get to a part that says Battle Master Builds. What? Excuse me? That's my job. Don't get me wrong, builds are great. I do a lot of them on this channel, and so do a lot of other content creators, but the point is, why would you only include it for Battle Master builds? I'll tell you why. It's because if they did it for every class and every subclass, the whole book would be nothing but potential builds, and there would be a massive amount of additional writing and additional paper that goes into the production of this book, and the thing would be 400 pages long. There's a reason why these books really ought not to include this, because if you do it for one, it begs the question of why didn't you do it for everyone else? And even though it's only a few lines of different abilities and a small paragraph of text to give you an overview, it's still essentially filler. The builds that all your favorite content creators are out there making are adding style to your character. They're actually adding the character and helping you to develop your own. And by offering you these different options, they're giving you the opportunity to help your creative process. Whereas what the books are offering you is simple bare bones skeletons which you can put your character's skin on top of. It might sound like I'm really hammering the book, but this is really just a minor gripe when it comes down to the overall aspects of this chapter. You're getting an extra class, you're getting extra subclasses, you're getting extra feats, extra abilities that change the way your characters work, additional spells that give you more flexibility and more chance to develop the kind of character you want. This whole section is really great. There's only these few minor little things that could have been improved, could have been done a little bit better, or just a few things that weren't really necessary to add. I'm going to give this chapter a very respectable 4 out of 5, because it covers exactly what we were expecting, exactly what we wanted, exactly what we got. A few little things, but overall it doesn't distract from the decent things that are available. So now we move on to chapter 2, which is Group Patrons. And unfortunately for me, I feel that this is where the book starts to lack in creativity. So group patrons are affiliations, organisations, or individuals that give you a reason to go out and complete quests. And of course, for your efforts, you get perks and prizes for participation. That's the whole chapter in a nutshell, and I probably could have used less words to describe it. One of the chief benefits of having group patrons is the group assistance. It says, having a group patron gives an adventuring group a common purpose. As a result of this unity, each member can grant an advantage to an ability check, attack roll, or saving throw. This is a useful thing to have, to be sure, but it's not really giving us anything groundbreaking. There are other things that give us advantages in many of these areas, and there are no reasons why we shouldn't be actively looking for other techniques that we can use to simulate the similar effect. Another thing that's nice about it is the perks that you can get, but these usually come in the form of some form of compensation, some kind of additional training, or maybe access to cheaper goods and sundries, or even potentially magical gifts or items. Whilst these little perks and benefits are nice, you really shouldn't be looking for reasons to not go out on your own adventures. In fact, you could find yourself working for a patron for ages just depending on how your DM runs their campaign. While they don't necessarily give you a whole bunch of ideas about what adventures to go on, they are tools for providing adventures, but you should always have an adventure around the corner that you can go on. You shouldn't have to rely too heavily on this kind of thing. I personally feel that this section is for DMs who have not done their homework. Your group patrons like quest givers, the associations add some realism and some structure to the world, and the perks you get are essentially quest rewards. This isn't the be-all and end-all, however. Honestly, I think the best part of these group patrons is the fact that they do bring some cohesion to you as a group. If you read this section on assignments, they give you an example of an academy, which, as it says, might not organise particular missions, so you, as the players, hunt down ancient artefacts knowing that your patron will reward you for bringing them back. I actually kind of like the idea of this loose affiliation, where you're still able to go out adventuring, but you still have that group cohesion. It still adds some structure to the world through the various factions and groups that are available, and you still gain some additional reward by bringing things back or proving your heroism or whatever the necessity is of that particular group. What this patron section essentially breaks down into is who's giving you the quests, what rewards can you get, who to contact, who's doing the work, and some quests that you can do in order to fulfill those goals. I really think they could have done more with this, but what really captures my imagination is the very last section of this chapter, which is being your own patron. So the example they get: founding your own organisation offers a greater degree of autonomy. When you're the boss, the perks of belonging to an organisation become expenses you have to worry about. You need to organise your own armoury, you need to bring in income so that you can keep the organisation running. This is something that I think should have been really expanded on. So I'm going to make a point here, and it might not make sense to some of you, but for those of you who are gamers who enjoy console games, it might make a bit of sense. So one game I really enjoy is Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. You start off doing your own assassination missions, but as you progress, you gather up more followers, you start training them in the ways, and then you send them off and you manage their missions. So they go off, they complete missions, they get rewards, coins, rare items. You can develop the characters in certain ways that make them different and individual from each other, and it's nice to watch that development. It's nice to go from you being a single character to essentially a group, an affiliation, where it's going to be world changing. Now, understandably, not everyone likes that kind of management that's involved. Some people just want to be out doing their own adventures, and I completely understand that. The point I'm trying to make, though, with the example that I've just given, is that who do I send out? Who's got the best odds of success? Who can I keep with me to help me with my missions? What happens if I lose one of my characters? These are all questions that I feel could be reflected in the group patrons as well. And this is where I think they missed a trick. They could have had events that modified the amount of income a particular group had. They could have had reputation modifiers that affect your standing with other groups, even going so far as to create allies or enemies. They could have had mission complications that force you to readjust how you expend your resources that are available as a patron. They could have even had a section on how to run your own affiliation and have things like income and expenses on annual reports and things like that. And they could have included the whole sidekick thing, which is coming in a later chapter. There's a section that comes later in chapter 4 on sidekicks and how to level them up. And it says whenever a group's average level goes up, the sidekick gains a level. Why couldn't this have been incorporated also into, say, something like a guild level? As your guild goes up in level, so too does the competence of the agents working for it. These are all things off the top of my head, but there's no reason why you couldn't add these to your own group patrons. But additionally, you can add them to the existing group patrons. How does the level of the guild influence the ease of your mission? How does the success or failure of the other agents impact what the player characters have to do if they're going out on a particular kind of quest? I'm just a little bit disappointed because I think they could have done so much more with it. They started this idea off in Eberron Rising from the Last War, and again it says being your own patron. For certain kinds of organizations you can either join an existing group or found your own. For some players, the idea of running a crime syndicate, inquisitive agency, mercenary company, or newspaper is much more exciting than working for someone else. The example in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything is, for some players, the idea of running a crime syndicate, mercenary company, arcane scholars collective, or other organization is far more exciting than working for somebody else. You can even hear, word for word almost, where it's just been ripped from the Eberron book and slapped into Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. A potentially great idea that could really have been expanded on, but something that was just recycled, repackaged, and shipped out. The thing is though, I don't want to hate on it too much because it's got me thinking, it's got me creating these new ideas, it's got me coming up with potential drawbacks, flaws, ideas, affiliations, and all of these things that could make or break a particular group patron or a particular organization or affiliation and how they interact with the others that are present within the world. So it's just got my creative gears whirling. So it's not all bad, but unfortunately not everyone is just going to have that spark of inspiration that has just been described here. Once again, a potentially good section that is essentially just filler if you already own the Eberron campaign book. The ideas are there, they're just not fleshed out enough. And for that, chapter 2 gets a middle of the road 2.5 out of 5. So hopefully then when we do part 2 of this, chapters 3 and 4 can up the pace a bit and offer us a little bit more. So that's the first part of my initial overview of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Once I've done the second part, I will get back to my original content, but it's just something I felt needed to be addressed because, let's be honest with ourselves, ours is not a cheap hobby, and if you're going to be parting with your money, you want to know that what you're getting is worth it. Perhaps it's not the glowing review so far that many of you hoped it might have been, but realistically, this is just how I see it. Now, there could be more in-depth and more nuance that perhaps I've missed, and that's understandable. There are certain things people will see in it that other people will not, and I'm happy for you to give your opinions on what you think is relevant or what you think I may have misinterpreted, but for the most part, I feel like perhaps there should have been a lot more substance to what we've got so far. Ultimately though, I'm not trying to upset anyone, I just want to have an objective look at what people are going to be getting if they decide to part with their money. As is, however, I wouldn't base your conclusion solely on this video alone. There is still another part to come, and I think in order to do the book justice, in order to be fair to it, we really need to analyse all of the chapters therein. What I will say though is check out some other content, look at other creators and see what they have to say about it. Read some of the reviews from people who've already purchased it and what they think you're getting for your money. And if it helps, tune in for the second part of this analysis if you think it's going to help you make a decision as to whether you really want this or not. Either way, if you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate a like, or if you just want to hear me rant some more, definitely give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, why not consider subscribing? There's a notification bell to keep you up to date on everything that's going on. And there's plenty of content already here that you might be able to benefit from, and lots more to come in the future. Also, we've got a great community here. There are some really switched on and really intuitive people who know what they're talking about. It's really worth interacting with each other in the comments. There are some really great ideas going around that everyone can benefit from, and it's going to make our gaming experience that much better. And with all that being said, I will see you guys next time at the gaming table.